Welcome back to today's teaching. There is a man sitting inside the synagogue. He has entered the place of teaching. He is surrounded by sacred language. He is present among people who read the law, honor the Sabbath, and believe themselves to be defending the ways of God. Yet, his right hand is withered. He has the hand, but the hand is not functioning according to its purpose. It is present, yet unable to express its strength. It belongs to him, yet something that should be living and active has been deprived of what it needs to flourish. And Jesus a physical healing and a disagreement but a much deeper pattern begins to emerge. The Sabbath, the synagogue, the man, the right side, the withering, the command to rise, the movement into the mist, the stretching forth, the restoration, and the religious leaders who become filled. Every detail participates in the teaching. Let's look at the story symbol. Represents the Sabbath first appears within the creation pattern. Genesis 2:2 says, "And on the seventh day, God ended his work which he had made, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had made." The source does not rest because of physical exhaustion. The rest announces completion. The work has reached the state in which everything can operate according to its intended purpose. Sabbath is the rest that emerges when everything has been restored to its proper order and purpose. His hand exists, but it is not operating in its purpose. His capacity is present, but it is incomplete. Something has fallen out of alignment. Something that should be living. Could the Sabbath be fully expressed while the hand remained unrestored? The synagogue represents the body, the inner temple. The synagogue is the place where Jesus enters and teaches. But throughout Scripture, the place of divine habitation gradually moves from an outward structure toward the human being. Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 3 verse 16, "Know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you. And again in 1 Corinthians 6:19, your body is the temple of the Holy Ghost, which is in you. The physical synagogue provides the setting, but the symbolic pattern brings the teaching inward. The synagogue represents the inner place of instruction. The temple is the human being. The teaching is entering consciousness. Jesus enters the synagogue and teaches because truth enters the inner temple to reveal what is functioning, what has hardened, and what has withered. This is not merely Jesus walking into a religious building. It is light entering the body, truth entering consciousness, the living word entering the inner sanctuary, and examining the capacities through which life is meant to be expressed. Whenever truth enters the temple within us, it does not merely affirm what we already believe. It reveals what has ceased functioning according to its purpose. The man represents the self-concept, the active principle. This is, we all have the active and receptive principle within us. We all have the masculine and feminine. So it's not about gender. Already told us in Genesis 5:2. They are named Adam. So it's not about gender. The passage tells us there was a man. This is the part of the human being that says, this is how I understand my place. This is what I permit myself to express. He represents the conscious identity through which intention becomes direction and action. When the self-concept is aligned, the person can participate consciously in life. But when the self-concept has accepted fear, shame, helplessness, inferiority, or dependency as identity, expression begins to wither. A person may possess gifts, yet believe I cannot use them. They may perceive truth, yet conclude. They may carry compassion, yet think it is not my place to act. They may recognize injustice, yet tell themselves authority must never be questioned. They may receive an idea, yet assume someone else is more qualified to bring it forth. The capacity is present, but the self-concept no longer gives it permission to live. The hand may reveal the condition, but the man reveals the identity from which expression proceeds. Next is the right side. The right side represents authority and power. Luke alone tells us that it was the man's right hand that was withered. That detail matters. Throughout scripture, the right side represents power, authority, favor, strength, and governing capacity. Jesus is described as sitting at the right hand of the Father. This does not require us to imagine two physical seats occupied by two separate divine beings. The language communicates authority. To sit at the right hand is to participate in the power, nature, and government of the source. Jacob also names his son Benjamin, which means the son of the right hand. The right side intensifies the meaning of the hand. This is not merely expression, it is authorized expression, empowered expression, the capacity to act with conscious agency, the capacity to bring what is inward into the world with strength and purpose. Therefore, the man's condition reveals more than difficulty acting. His relationship with his own authority has withered. He is present, but his power to participate is restricted. He is alive, vitality. The withered right hand represents a self-concept whose power of authorized expression has been deprived of life. The hand represents expression and agency. The hand is the instrument through which the invisible becomes visible. The mind conceives. The heart desires. The spirit inspires. But the hand expresses. Through the hand, we build, we write, we cultivate, we give, we receive, we protect, we release, we comfort, we create, we serve, we reach toward another person. We turn inward understanding into outward embodiment. A teaching may live within the mind, but the hand brings it into practice. Compassion may exist within the heart, but the hand feeds, lifts, embraces, and serves. Purpose may be recognized inwardly, but agency brings it into expression. This is why the symbol is so powerful. The man is not necessarily empty within. The problem is that what is within him cannot move freely into expression. The hand is where inward life becomes visible participation. To wither is to die through deprivation. To wither is not simply to disappear. It is to remain present while losing the nourishment necessary to live fully. A branch withers when it is cut off from the flow of life. A plant withers when it lacks water, light, or nourishment. Its form may remain for a time, but vitality is leaving it. This man still has a hand, but the hand has been deprived. Its existence remains, its full expression does not. This allows us to ask inwardly, what causes human agency to wither? What deprives expression of nourishment? Fear can do it. Shame can do it. Repeated rejection can do it. Trauma can do it. Controlling relationships can do it. Authoritarian religion can do it. A system that punishes questions can do it. A self-concept built upon unworthiness can do it. Years of hearing, do not think, do not question, do not speak, do not create, do not trust your discernment, do not move without our approval. Eventually, the hand remains, but it stops stretching. The person retains the capacity, but no longer believes they possess the authority to use it. To wither is to lose living expression because the connection to nourishment has been interrupted. And this is precisely why truth must enter the synagogue. The man does not need a different hand. He needs the existing hand reconnected to life. He does not need someone else's authority. He needs his own capacity restored to the purpose already within it. He does not need to become another person. He needs what has died within his self-concept to receive life again. Real life example. For generations, women have entered synagogues, churches, workplaces, governments, schools, and homes, carrying intelligence, discernment, leadership, creativity, spiritual insight, and the ability to teach. Yet, their authority of expression has been deliberately deprived of nourishment. The hand was present. The gift was present. The wisdom was present. The calling was present. But people misunderstood, isolated, and misquoted Paul to tell women, you may listen, but you may not teach. You may serve, but you may not lead. You may possess wisdom, but you must not speak with authority. You may support another person's vision, but you must not bring forth your own. That is a withered right hand. Not because women lacked power, but because religious and social systems repeatedly discouraged them from exercising it. And look where the man is found. Inside the synagogue. This mirrors women whose agency withered. Not because they were separated from religion, but because they were sitting inside religious environments that kept quoting sacred texts to restrict their expression. They were permitted to be present, provided they remained powerless. They could sing, clean, cook, nurture, give, organize, and finance. But when they attempted to interpret, teach, question, govern, or lead, someone reached for a sentence attributed to Paul. Yet, when we observe Paul's entire ministry, those interpretations do not align with his fruit. Paul recognized women who labored beside him, served as ministers, hosted assemblies, supported the mission, instructed others, carried letters, prophesied, and participated actively in the work. So Paul's teachings were turned into the very thing his wider ministry contradicts: a law used to keep the right hand of women from stretching forth. And it reaches beyond religious settings. Society repeated the same pattern. Women cannot lead. Women are too emotional. Women should not make major decisions. Women belong only in supporting roles. A woman with authority is difficult. A woman who speaks confidently is rebellious. Again, the hand exists, but the environment deprives it of movement. And then Jesus enters the synagogue and says, "Rise up and stand forth in the midst." He does not ask the man to remain quietly at the edge. He moves him from invisibility to visibility, from the margin to the center, from private restriction to public restoration. Then he says, "Stretch forth thy hand." Symbolically, this is truth saying to everyone whose agency was restricted by inherited interpretation. Truth is saying, stand forth, use your voice, exercise your discernment, bring forth your wisdom, teach what you understand, build what you envision, lead where you have been entrusted. Stop waiting for systems that benefited from your silence to authorize your expression. And the most revealing part is that the religious leaders do not rejoice when the hand is restored. They become furious. Why? Because restoration threatens systems built upon restricted agency. The synagogue could accommodate the man while his hand remained withered. His restoration became threatening when he could stretch it forth. That mirrors what has happened to women perfectly. Some systems celebrate women's presence while opposing women's authority. They welcome the woman while her right hand remains withered. But once she teaches, leads, questions inherited conclusions, names contradictions, or acts without seeking unnecessary permission, she is labeled rebellious, deceived, unsubmissive, or out of order. The controversy was never simply about the Sabbath. It was about who was, and Jesus' response is restoration. Truth did not give the man a right hand. Truth restored his freedom to use the right hand he already possessed. Likewise, women do not need to be given intelligence, authority, spiritual capacity, or leadership by religious institutions. Those capacities are already present. What must be confronted are the interpretations that deprive those capacities of nourishment and punished women for stretching them forth. Whenever scripture is interpreted in a way that causes the voice, agency, discernment, or calling of another human being to wither, we must examine whether we are defending divine order or protecting a system that is threatened by restoration. And the fruit will reveal it. Jesus restores agency. The religious system plots against the one who restored it. One interpretation produces wholeness. The other protects withering. That tells us which one understood the law. Luke 6 verse 7. And the scribes and Pharisees watched him, whether he would heal on the Sabbath day, that they might find an accusation against him. The man's right hand is withered. His power of expression has been deprived of life. And the people responsible for interpreting the law are watching Jesus. But they are not watching to learn. They are not watching to understand what the Sabbath means. They are not watching with compassion for the man. They are not asking, what happened to his hand? How long has he lived this way? How might his agency be restored? Could this be the day he finally becomes whole? They are watching for one reason: that they might find an accusation against him. They already know that Jesus has the capacity to restore the man. They do not question whether restoration is possible. They are waiting to see whether Jesus will do it at a time their interpretation has declared unacceptable. The man's suffering is not their concern. The timing of his restoration is. They can tolerate the withered hand more easily than they can tolerate restoration occurring outside their control. This is what happens When observation loses its desire to understand, observation becomes surveillance, discernment becomes suspicion, the law becomes a weapon, and a suffering human being becomes evidence in someone else's case. Next, the scribes and Pharisees. The scribes were associated with reading, preserving, teaching, and interpreting the law. The Pharisees were deeply committed to maintaining what they understood as religious faithfulness and separation from impurity. In themselves, study, preservation, discipline, and careful interpretation are not evil. The problem is not that they care about the law. The problem is the consciousness from which they are approaching it. They are not allowing the law to reveal the nature of the source. They are using the law to confirm a conclusion they have already reached. They possess knowledge of the text, but their knowledge is not producing compassion. They can identify what they consider a violation, but they cannot recognize that leaving the man withered contradicts the very meaning of Sabbath. They know the wording of the law, but they have lost contact with the life within it. Symbolically, the scribes and Pharisees represent the parts of consciousness that preserve inherited conclusions and defend established interpretations, even when the fruit of those interpretations is visible restriction. They represent the inward voice that says, "This is how it has always been understood. This is what our authorities taught us. This person must remain in their assigned place. Restoration may be good, but not if it challenges our order. Expression may be permitted, but only within the boundaries we control." This consciousness does not actually oppose life openly. It simply surrounds life with so many conditions that restoration is continually postponed. Next, they watched him. Luke does not merely say they saw Jesus. He says they watched him. This is focused observation. But their intention has already corrupted what they will perceive. We often say, observe before you conclude. But they have reversed the order. They concluded before they observed. Now they are watching selectively for something that will support their accusation. This is confirmation bias operating inside a religious setting. They are not asking, what does this act reveal? They are asking, how can this act be fitted into what we have decided already about him? That distinction is essential. Two people can witness the same restoration and interpret it differently because they entered the moment with different intentions. One sees a human being made whole. Another sees a threat to religious authority. One sees compassion. Another sees rebellion. One sees Sabbath fulfilled. Another sees Sabbath violated. The event has not changed. The consciousness interpreting it has. What we are determined to prove will often govern what we permit ourselves to see. This is why genuine discernment requires more than watching. It requires honesty about why we are watching. Are we observing because we want to understand? Or are we gathering fragments that can be used against someone? Are we listening to the entire teaching? Or are we waiting for one sentence to isolate? Are we examining the fruit? Or are we protecting a conclusion inherited before the investigation began? Next, whether he would heal. Notice what they expect Jesus to do: heal, restore, make whole. They are waiting to see whether he will perform an act whose fruit is unmistakably good. This exposes the depth of the contradiction. They are not watching to see whether he will harm the man. They are watching to see whether he will heal him. Yet, they intend to treat healing as evidence for accusation. When a system has become more committed to protecting its interpretation, recognizing life, even restoration can be presented as wrongdoing. This pattern appears throughout human experience. A woman uses her voice and she is called rebellious. A person establishes a healthy boundary and they are called disrespectful. Someone questions an inherited interpretation and they are accused of lacking faith. A worker exposes injustice and they are labeled disloyal. A suffering person seeks appropriate professional care and they are told they have failed spiritually. Someone leaves a harmful environment and is accused of abandoning divine order. In each case, something life-giving occurs. A voice is restored. A boundary is established. Discernment becomes active. Harm is exposed. Care is received. A person returns to safety. Yet, the restoration is treated as the offense because it challenges the arrangements that benefited from the person's withering. This verse speaks powerfully to the experience of women whose agency has been restricted by religious and social systems. For generations, women have possessed wisdom, discernment, leadership, creativity, spiritual insight, and the ability to teach. The hand was present. The capacity was present. The life was present. Yet, interpretations of scripture, often built from isolated, misunderstood, or misapplied statements from Paul, were used to deprive that hand of movement. Women were told, "You may attend, but you may not teach. You may serve, but you may not govern. You may receive revelation, but you must not speak with authority. You may support the vision, but you must not lead one. You may possess a gift, but its expression must remain subordinate to our permission. The woman was allowed inside the synagogue. Her right hand simply had to remain withered. And when she began to stretch it forth, when she taught, led, interpreted, questioned, created, built, or exercised authority, the religious watchers appeared. They did not necessarily examine the fruit of her work. They watched for something that could be used as an accusation. Her confidence was called pride. Her discernment was called deception. Her leadership was called rebellion. Her questions were called disorder. The same system that tolerated her presence became threatened by her expression. This is precisely what is happening in the synagogue. The problem is not that the hand exists. The problem begins when Jesus restores its power to move. The observers can accommodate the man while his agency remains restricted. But they are already preparing an accusation against the one who may restore it. This is why Paul must be read through the full witness of his ministry, rather than through isolated statements detached from their setting. The same Paul, whose words have been used to silence women, also recognized women who labored beside him, prophesied, served communities, hosted assemblies, instructed others, carried responsibility, and participated in the work of the gospel. If our interpretation of Paul produces the permanent withering of women's agency, while Paul's own ministry reveals women actively participating, then our interpretation must be re-examined. We cannot claim to defend Paul while producing fruit that contradicts the wider plan of Paul's own ministry. And this is not limited to religious institutions. The same consciousness appears in society. A woman may be welcomed into the workplace until she seeks leadership. She may be praised for being helpful until she becomes decisive. She may be considered intelligent until her understanding challenges established authority. She may be celebrated for her strength until that strength is no longer being used merely to carry everyone else. Society often welcomes the woman's hands when they are serving, cleaning, nurturing, supporting, organizing, and producing, but questions those same hands when they begin directing, building, governing, owning, and leading. The issue was never whether the woman had a hand. The issue was whether she should be permitted to stretch it forth with authority. The Sabbath as a condition placed upon restoration. They are watching to see whether Jesus will heal on the Sabbath day. Their interpretation has introduced a condition. The man may be restored, but not now. Yet, if Sabbath represents completion, purposeful order, and divine rest, then not now contradicts the meaning of the day. What better day could there be for something deprived of life to be restored to its purpose? What better expression of Sabbath than the end of unnecessary restriction, than a hand functioning as a hand? The observers protect an outward symbol of rest while opposing inward restoration. They defend the day, but resist what the day reveals. They want Sabbath without restoration, completion without wholeness, and sacred order without the human being functioning in purpose. But Jesus reveals that restoration is not an exception to the Sabbath. Restoration is the fruit of Sabbath. The seventh day announces that the work has reached fulfillment. Therefore, if the hand remains with it, something within the living temple has not yet entered rest. Its rest will not be expressed by continuing to do nothing. Its rest will be expressed when it is restored to the effortless fulfillment of its purpose. A hand at rest is not actually a hand that never moves. It is a hand no longer struggling against the condition that prevents its proper movement. Divine rest is not the absence of expression. It is expression released from bondage and restored to alignment. Next, that they might find an accusation. The man is not at the center of their concern. Jesus is. The hand is not being observed as a place needing life. It is being used as bait. The suffering of one human being has become an opportunity to accuse another. This is what distorted religious reasoning can do. It can become so focused on proving someone wrong that it forgets the person whose life is affected by the argument. A debate about whether women may teach can become so consumed with defending positions that no one pauses to observe the wisdom, fruit, clarity, compassion, or transformative work emerging through the woman. A discussion about doctrine can become so focused on correct terminology that the actual human consequences of the teaching disappear. A person's wound becomes an illustration. Their restriction becomes tradition. Their restoration becomes controversy. Whenever the defense of an interpretation requires the human being affected by it to disappear, something has gone wrong in our understanding of the law. Jesus will not allow the man to remain invisible while others debate what is lawful. He is about to bring him into the midst. He will place the human consequence of their interpretation at the center of the synagogue. Before anyone can continue discussing the Sabbath, They will have to look at the person they are reasoning will live with it. And this is an essential law of discernment. Never evaluate an interpretation only by how convincingly it is defended. Bring the people affected by it into the midst and examine its fruit in their lives. Does the interpretation restore agency or deprive it of nourishment? Does it cultivate discernment or demand dependency? Does it bring dignity or reinforce shame? Does it call gifts into expression or command them to remain hidden? Does it produce love, truth, compassion, peace, and wholeness? Or does it produce fear, silence, restriction, accusation, and withering? The fruit will reveal the governing nature. Let's look at the hidden withering in the watchers. The man's hand is visibly withered, but something within the observers has withered too. Their capacity for compassion has lost nourishment. Their ability to rejoice in another person's restoration has dried up. Their understanding cannot stretch beyond the boundary of inherited interpretation. Their hearts have become so hardened that they can anticipate healing and prepare an accusation at the same time. The man's condition affects his hand. Their condition affects the way they see. And a withered way of seeing may be more dangerous than a withered hand, because it can turn another person's healing into evidence of wrongdoing. The man cannot stretch his hand, but the religious leaders cannot stretch their understanding. One condition is visible, the other hides beneath devotion to the law. One is waiting to be restored, the other believes it needs no restoration. This is why sacred knowledge requires humility. The more familiar we become with a text, tradition, or doctrine, the more carefully we must examine whether familiarity has hardened into certainty without compassion. The ability to stretch. Can we witness restoration without feeling that our authority is being threatened? Or are we watching truth only to find an accusation against it? The scribes and Pharisees have not spoken their intention aloud. But the next verse tells us Jesus knew their thoughts. They are watching Jesus, but Jesus perceives the consciousness from which they are watching. They see an outward action that has not yet occurred. He sees the inward accusation already taking form. And instead of avoiding the confrontation, hiding the healing, or postponing the man's restoration, Jesus says to the man, "Rise up and stand forth in the midst." The people attempting to use the man's condition as evidence will now be required to look directly at him. Jesus brings the person affected by the interpretation into the center. He does not discuss restoration abstractly. He does not allow the law to be debated, while the withered human capacity remains hidden at the edge of the room. He says, "Rise, stand forth, come into the midst." The agency that has withered is about to become visible. The self-concept that may have accepted life at the margins is about to stand in the center. And the truth they were watching, in order to accuse, will expose the thought they believed were hidden. They watched his hands, but he knew their hearts. Now listen to the complete movement. Jesus says, "Rise up and stand forth in the midst." And the man arose and stood forth. This is not merely Jesus telling the man where to position his physical body. Every movement reveals an inward transformation. Rise up. Awaken from the identity that has kept you beneath your true nature. Stand forth. Become established in authority. Operate consciously from what you now remember. In the midst, return to the center, the core, the place of significance from which you have been marginalized. And then Luke says, "And he arose and stood forth." He responded to the word by becoming its expression. He awakened. He became established. He occupied the center. Before his hand was restored, his self-concept changed position. Jesus has not yet said, "Stretch forth thy hand." The outward instrument of authority is still withered, but the man is already standing in authority. That means his restoration begins before anything visible happens to his hand. He did not wait for his condition to change before changing the position from which he understood himself. He could have said, "I cannot stand in the midst because my hand is withered. Everyone will stare at me. I belong at the edge. I should wait until I am whole before becoming visible." But when truth called him, he arose. The condition that affected his expression no longer determined his position. He stood forth while the hand was still withered. That is powerful, because many people believe, when I become confident, I will stand. When I am fully healed, I will speak. When others approve of qualified, circumstances change, I'll become visible. But the sequence in this passage is reversed. He hears the word. He rises. He stands forth in the midst. Then he stretches forth the hand. The hand is restored. He does not rise because the hand has already been restored. The restoration unfolds after he rises into a new awareness of himself. This connects perfectly to the self-concept. The man represents conscious identity. It's not about gender. We all have it. The active principle and the receptive principle. Therefore, when the man arises, the self-concept rises. He is no longer identifying primarily with the withering. He begins operating from the authority of the word spoken within the temple. Rise, stand, come into the center. And stand forth is stronger than merely standing up. Stand forth carries the same forward, becoming visible in this place. He is not hiding the withered hand. He is not waiting until his condition looks acceptable. He stands publicly in the very place where people are watching to accuse Jesus for restoring him. The people who wanted to keep restoration under surveillance now have to watch the man embody awakening. And this speaks so powerfully to women whose authority has been withered by religious and social systems. Before the woman's voice can stretch forth, she must rise from the identity imposed upon her. Rise from you are secondary. You are too emotional. You must remain silent. You cannot teach. You cannot lead. You need permission to express what is within you. Truth says, rise up. Awaken from that inherited self-concept. Stand forth. Operate from the authority already placed within you. In the midst, stop. The man's hand still carried evidence of his former restriction, but his posture now carried evidence of his awakened identity. That is the revelation. Before authority returns to its expression, authority returns to his consciousness. The hand will soon reveal outwardly what has already occurred inwardly. He has risen from the withered identity. He has become established in the word of truth. He has returned to the center of his own being. And from that awakened position, Jesus can now say, stretch forth thy hand. Because once the self-concept remembers who it is, the expression must follow. Luke 6 verse 9. Then said Jesus unto them, I will ask you one thing. Is it lawful on the Sabbath days to do good or to do evil? To save life or to destroy it? The man has awakened. He has risen from the identity that kept him at the margins. He now stands forth in the midst, established in authority, occupying the center, remembering who he is. Yet, his hand is still withered. And before Jesus tells him to stretch it forth, Jesus turns toward the scribes and Pharisees and asks them one question. Is it lawful on the Sabbath days to do good or to do evil? To save life or to destroy it? Jesus does not ask, what have you traditionally been taught about the Sabbath? He does not ask, which interpretation has existed the longest? He does not ask, which authority agrees with you? He does not even ask, is it lawful to heal? He moves beneath the specific argument and brings them back to the governing nature behind every interpretation. Does it produce good or evil? Does it preserve life or destroy it? Jesus is teaching us how to examine the law. The question is not merely whether an interpretation can be defended with sacred language. The question is, what does that interpretation produce in the living human being standing before us? Next, I will ask you one thing. Jesus reduces the entire controversy to one thing: explanations, distinctions, and arguments. They may have been prepared to debate categories. They may have been ready to quote authorities. But Jesus brings every complicated argument back to one itself. This one question, because an interpretation may sound disciplined while producing bondage. It may sound faithful while depriving people of life. It may appear orderly while keeping human capacity withered. It may be supported by generations of tradition while contradicting the nature of the source. Jesus does not permit complexity to hide the fruit. There is a human being standing in the midst. The effect of their interpretation are no longer theoretical. They can see the withered hand. They can see the capacity that is not functioning. They can see what the understanding of Sabbath would leave unchanged. Therefore, Jesus asked one thing: will your law restore what has withered, or protect the conditions under which it remains withered? Next, is it lawful? This question exposes the true purpose of law. The scribes and Pharisees are asking whether healing violates the law. Jesus asked whether refusing to restore life can possibly fulfill it. They are measuring the action against the rule. Jesus is measuring the interpretation against its fruit. They are asking, was the boundary crossed? Jesus is asking, was good accomplished? They are asking, was the tradition preserved? Jesus is asking, was life preserved? They are concerned about whether the hand should move on the Sabbath. Jesus is concerned that the hand has lost its ability to move at all. They use the law to judge the restoration. Jesus uses restoration to review whether they have understood the law. The word lawful must therefore mean more than technically permitted. Something is truly lawful when it expresses the nature from which the law proceeds. If the source is life, love, truth, mercy, justice, and compassion, then the law cannot be fulfilled through an interpretation that opposes those qualities. An interpretation cannot produce fear, silence, restriction, and distraction, and then call itself righteous merely because it quotes the correct words. The character expressed through the interpretation reveals the government behind it. The law is not fulfilled merely when its wording is defended. It is fulfilled when its living purpose becomes visible. Next, on the Sabbath day, Jesus asks whether it is lawful on the Sabbath to do good or evil. But if Sabbath represents completion, rest, alignment, and everything operating according to its purpose, the answer is already contained within the symbol. To restore the hand, it reveals Sabbath within the man. The hand exists for expression. The right side represents authority. The man represents the active self-concept and not gender. When his right hand is restored, his power of authorized expression returns to its intended function. That is completion. That is alignment. That is Sabbath. Leaving the hand withered would preserve the outward observance of a day while denying the inward meaning of the day. It will protect the symbol and reject its fulfillment. What's good is a Sabbath celebrated around the man. A Sabbath never becomes a reality within the man. The leaders believe doing nothing protects the Sabbath. But Jesus reveals that inactivity is not automatically rest. A hand that cannot move is not necessarily resting. It may be bound. A voice that has been silenced is not actually peaceful. It may be afraid. A woman who has been forbidden to teach is not actually submitted. Her agency may have been deprived of expression. A person who never questions authority is not actually faithful. Their discernment may have withered. A community without visible disagreement is not actually unified. Its members may have learned that speaking honestly is unsafe. Stillness produced by wholeness is rest. Stillness produced by restriction is withering. Therefore, Jesus is not disturbing the Sabbath. He is distinguishing divine rest from enforced inactivity. He is revealing that true Sabbath does not keep the hand motionless. True Sabbath removes the bondage that prevents the hand from functioning naturally. Next, to do good or to do evil. Jesus gives them only two possibilities: to do good or to do evil. There is no neutral category in his question. That is significant because the scribes and Pharisees may have imagined that refusing to heal was simply doing nothing. They were not harming the man according to their reasoning. They were merely postponing his restoration. But Jesus placed the refusal to do good beside the doing of evil. Why? Because when the power to restore life is present, deliberately withholding that restoration is not neutral. If the hand can be restored today, why must the man remain withered until tomorrow? What sacred purpose is served by one additional day of restriction? What quality of the source is revealed by postponing wholeness? What does the delay accomplish besides preserving the interpreter's control? When good can be done, and inherited reasoning forbids it, the refusal to restore life participates in the continuation of harm. This does not mean every human being possesses the ability to repair every condition. It means that once we can recognize how an interpretation is actively depriving another person of life, we cannot. If a teaching has silenced women for generations, continuing to repeat it without examining its context and fruit is not neutral. If a system has deprived people of dignity, defending it because it is familiar is not neutral. If a person's agency has withered under shame, repeatedly reinforcing that shame is not neutral. If we recognize that our words are producing fear and dependency, but refuse to reconsider them, we are not merely preserving doctrine. We are participating in the fruit it produces. James later expresses the same principle in James 4:17. Therefore, to him that knoweth to do good, and goodness is not merely the absence of visible wrongdoing. It is the active expression of a life-giving nature. Jesus reveals that righteousness is not proven by what we refuse to do. It is revealed by what our understanding brings forth. What does it mean to do good? To do good is to express the nature of the source. Good restores. Good establishes dignity. Good returns capacity to purpose. Good reconnects what has been deprived of life. Good calls him to rise. Good calls him to rise. Good restores his authority. This is not sentimental goodness. It is courageous goodness. Jesus knows they are watching. He knows they are searching for an accusation. He knows restoring the man will intensify their opposition. Yet, he does good openly. Goodness does not cease to be good, merely because the system has classified it as rebellion. This speaks powerfully to every woman who has been told that using her gift is disorder. Teaching may be called rebellion. Leadership may be called pride. Discernment may be called deception. Independence may be called insubordination. Setting boundaries may be called disrespect. But Jesus brings us back to the fruit. Does her teaching bring clarity? Does her leadership protect and establish others? Does her discernment expose harmful patterns? Does her voice nourish life? Does her work demonstrate wisdom, love, integrity, compassion, and truth? Then we must examine whether the accusation reveals her wrongdoing or the discomfort of a system watching a withered hand become active. The name assigned to an action does not determine its nature. The fruit reveals the nature from which it proceeds. Next, to save life. To save life is to preserve, restore, recover, and bring into wholeness what was in danger of being lost. The man is physically alive, yet Jesus still asks whether it is lawful to save life. This tells us that life means more than continued biological existence. A person can be breathing while something essential within them is withering. They may be alive, but unable to express their wisdom. Alive, but disconnected from their agency. Alive, but governed by fear. Alive, but convinced they have no authority. Alive, but unable to bring their inward gifts into visible participation. Alive, but existing at the margins of their own consciousness. Therefore, salvation within this verse appears as restoration to living function. To save life is to recover the divine capacity that deprivation, fear, or false identity has prevented from flourishing. Jesus saves life by awakening the man. He saves life by calling him to rise. He saves life by establishing him in the midst. He saves life by restoring the hand to its purpose. The salvation is not merely a promise that something will happen to the man after death. Salvation enters the synagogue. It addresses his present condition. It restores his present agency. It returns him to purposeful participation. The evidence that life has been saved is that what was withered begins to function again. When someone recovers their voice, life is being saved. When a woman remembers that she bears the image and likeness of the source, life is being saved. When a person lives an identity built upon shame, life is being saved. When discernment awakens after years of dependency, life is being saved. When creativity returns after repeated rejection, life is being saved. When the self-concept rises and becomes established in truth, life is being saved. Salvation is life restored to expression. next or to destroy it. The contrast is not merely between healing and failing to heal. It is between saving life and destroying it. This becomes even more striking when we read what happens after the restoration. Luke tells us in Luke 6:11, and they were filled with madness and communed one with another what they might do to Jesus. Mark 3:6 says, and the Pharisees went forth and straightway took counsel with the Herodians against him, how they might destroy him. Jesus asked, is it lawful to save life or to destroy it? Then the actions of everyone present answer the question. Jesus restores the man. The religious leaders plan destruction. Jesus brings life to a withered hand. They allow accusation to govern their hearts. Jesus restores agency. They seek to eliminate the one who challenged their authority. The question becomes a mirror. They do not answer Jesus with their mouths. They answer him through the fruit they produce. The one they accuse of violating the law saves life. The ones claiming to defend the law plot destruction.